Star Wars The Force Awakens. I think out of all of his movies, I think this is probably like my second favorite one. I know not a lot of people love the new trilogy. Overall, I think people at least think the first movie is, I guess, the most solid one. I guess, people love Last Jedi, but, don't really have to talk about that one. But at least for, Force Awakens, I really enjoyed it. I think it was like a really good launch point into kind of this new iteration of Star Wars, because previously, with the prequels, they got a lot of hate and everything, which is totally understandable. But it's funny now because people love the prequels now, and they kind of hate the new trilogy. But I know back in the late 2000s and all that, after Revenge of the Sith, George Lucas was saying no, this is it, this is done, there's no more Star Wars movies, and the brand kind of went down from there. There wasn't really much going on. Maybe the Clone Wars series was going on, but there weren't really any movies happening. But then when Disney bought Lucasfilm, they're like, hey, the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna make more movies. And George Lucas sold the rights to Star Wars to Bob Iger and to Disney, and which kind of a bummer in a way, in retrospect, because at first George Lucas thought they were going to take his ideas for the sequels and kind of go on from there, but then Bob Iger was like we kind of want to make something more for the fan, Kathleen Kennedy as well, so we're going to make something more for the fans. And they actually hired Michael Arndt, who did Little Miss Sunshine and Toy Story 3 to write the script. And I feel like he was trying to do more of what George Lucas set out to do with his sequels and stuff for his original ideas. He was trying to balance it out, trying to I guess serve two masters, try to be true to what George Lucas established with his original ideas for the sequel trilogy, and then this kind of obligations by Disney and Kathleen Kennedy and Bob Iger of kind of introducing all these new characters, and then kind of having them meet the old characters. And then originally Luke Skywalker was going to be one of the main characters in it, but then Michael Arndt realized that every scene that he was in, Luke kind of took over, so he decided to have Luke be the MacGuffin of the story and have him at the very end. And it's going to be kind of the search for Luke Skywalker in a way, where these two new characters discover who Luke Skywalker is, and then kind of go from there. But then as production went on, he was working on the script for 8 months, and he said he had to realize that he needed another 18 months in order to complete the script, which would have been interesting if they actually had a really solid script moving forward. Just another thing that gets brought up is that the fact that Disney didn't have a plan moving forward. They kind of just okay, we need to rush out, Force Awakens, we bought, Star Wars from George Lucas to us here at Disney, and we need to make a movie as quickly as possible, or we're gonna lose the rights, with all our $4.5 billion investment and all that. So they kind of had to rush out a script, get production moving forward, because they wanted to have it out by 2015, which was originally supposed to be May 2015, but with all delays, they pushed it to December of 2015. And then, Michael Arndt was taking too long, so then they had to fire him, which was, kind of a shame. Then they brought on Lawrence Kasdan, and then brought on J.J. Abrams, because he's kind of the golden boy and everything. They saw his work on Star Trek. They saw that he kind of brought this new aesthetic to those movies, so they brought him on for Star Wars. He was a co-writer on the script, so they worked on it for. I read that they wrote the first draft in 6 weeks or something, with another month or two of revisions. So it's just okay, 8 months working on a script versus a couple months, kind of see the result. But I mean, I think overall, I think they did a pretty good job of balancing kind of the old Star Wars aesthetic with the new Star Wars aesthetic. But I think the only downside is that JJ's whole mentality is we have to go backwards in order to go forwards. So it's pretty much just beat for beat A New Hope, which it's kind of a detriment. Because I was reading about George Lucas's original ideas for the sequel trilogy, and really much more about kind of rebuilding. Luke Skywalker is trying to rebuild the Jedi Order. Princess Leia becomes the new chancellor of this kind of the New Republic. And it's kind of the whole rebuilding from there. And then you kind of have the seedy underbelly, Darth Maul is still alive at this point. This is before the whole rebels and stuff with him. So he was kind of this kind of new terrorist leader trying to create all this chaos as the Republic's being rebuilt. So I thought, all that could have been really cool. But with this one, it's called Star Wars. So I guess JJ thought, there has to be another war. So we have these two factions of like the First Order and the Resistance, which they don't explain at all in the movies. You have to read all the books and everything and all the comics in order to understand. Right off the bat, it's the whole search for Luke Skywalker. First Order's after them because they find out about this missing piece to this map to Luke Skywalker's location that's held by Laura Santeca, played by Max von Sydow. So they kind of go to the planet of Jakku to find him, but then Princess Leia dispatches Poe Dameron, played by Oscar Isaac, in order to meet up with Max von Sydow's character and like get this piece before him. And then you get the whole kind of opening action scene of the First Order ship landing on the planet of Jakku in the village. Kylo Ren, the big bad villain, Darth Vader fanboy, slaying him down, capturing Poe. But before that, Poe put the little missing piece, little drive into BB-8, the little soccer ball droid, and he kind of goes off in the desert. So, kind of right off the bat, you have very much the beats of A New Hope of the, Star Destroyer going after the Tantive 4, capturing Princess Leia, and then meanwhile, Princess Leia puts the message and the Death Star plans, the big super weapon, into R2-D2 when the astromech droid, and he kind of goes down to Tatooine, another desert planet. So as the story goes on, we have character of Rey, who's like a scavenger on the planet Jakku, finds BB-8 after he was captured by, Tito, one kind of like little creatures on the Lugabeast character, finds him, saves him and all that. And then meanwhile, you have the character of Finn, played by John Boyega, who, after that kind of opening battle, he realizes that he doesn't want to be a stormtrooper anymore, and he ends up rescuing Poe Dameron. They escape into a TIE fighter, and they have that whole kind of fun battle, which, it was really, really, really cool. They have the fun banter. Poe gives Finn the name because originally his name is FN2187, which is like another reference to like 2187, which is something that was in a short film that George Lucas was inspired by, that kind of gave him, ideas for like filmmaking, and then eventually into Star Wars, which gets brought up in the series. So they get rescued, but then they get shot down by the First Order and then land on Jakku, and then he goes to the village where Rey is. During that whole battle, he realizes that Poe is actually trying to get back to Jakku in order to find BB-8, the droid. So then when Finn lands in Jakku and then goes to the village and sees the little BB-8 droid, he realizes that that's one that Poe's going after, and realizes that the First Order's also after it. So then when Finn and Rey actually meet each other, Finn lies to Rey and said, "Oh yeah, he's part of the Resistance. I'm part of the Resistance." And all that. And Rey's like, "Oh, I never met a Resistance pilot before." He's like, "Well, this is what we look like. Most of us, some of us are different." But so they have their whole like banter and all that, and then the First Order finds out about the crashed TIE fighters, so they go after him, and then they have the whole like chase throughout the desert. The TIE fighters are shooting down at them. They need a ship, so Finn's like, "Oh, well, what about that one?" And then Rey's like, "That ship's garbage. Let's go after that one." And then that ship gets destroyed, and we pan over, and we see them go over to the Millennium Falcon, which is like a really cool scene. You hear the classic Star Wars music. They have the whole chase throughout the Star Destroyer graveyard or something, kind of going through that. They get away, they destroy the TIE fighters, and they get intercepted by Han Solo and his ship. They have their whole confrontation with other kind of smugglers and everything. They get away, and they kind of have their whole scene with Han Solo, and they talk about like the Force, it's true, all of it. Like, we need to get this droid to the Resistance. And then they realize that they need a new ship, so they go to Maz Kanata's castle, and they kind of like barter with her in order to get BB-8 to the Resistance. And Finn, thinking that he doesn't really belong here, he wants to run away from the First Order, he kind of like flees from it. And then Rey kind of hears like this kind of calling to her, so she kind of goes into like this basement area, then unlocks the chest and finds Luke Skywalker's lightsaber, which they never explained how she got it, but I know there's supposed to be kind of like this deleted scene where we see kind of like this flashback of like Luke's severed hand, because he got it chopped off at the end of Empire Strikes Back, falling through space, and then somebody like grabbing it, and then we kind of story goes on from there. But they decided to cut it, and actually like Maz Kanata was supposed to go with the characters to the Resistance planet, but JJ realized that Maz Kanata didn't really have anything to do, so they decided to like kind of cut all that. But right before Rey and Maz have their whole conversation of like, the Force is calling out to you, and you have to realize that your parents aren't coming for you, because the reason why Rey stayed on the planet was because she was always like waiting for her family to come back for her and everything, so she was kind of really resistant about leaving Jakku. And then Maz tells her that you have to realize that your family's not coming back, but you can always like look for a new family, and then that that being Luke Skywalker, since she realizes that she's, Force sensitive and all that. So before, they kind of make new plans, the First Order comes down, destroys Maz's castle, tries to go after the BB-8 droid, but then Kylo Ren meets up with Rey and then realizes that she's seen the map to Luke Skywalker earlier on, where Han, Finn, and Rey were kind of like trying to formulate plans of finding Luke Skywalker. Uses the Force on her, she faints, captures her, takes her up to the First Order ship, and then we have Finn and Han meeting with Leia and C-3PO, and then going to the planet. And then not only does Finn want to go to Starkiller Base in order to rescue Rey, but also they have to destroy Starkiller Base because they realize that it's a planet-killing weapon. People joke like it's another Death Star, which pretty much it is. Which I didn't really care for. I think it would have been really cool if they just kind of stuck with having the movie be just about the search for Luke Skywalker instead of trying to destroy another Death Star in a way. I know it's like Starkiller Base, but it's pretty much it's another Death Star. Let's just be honest. And they have this whole mission of Han, Chewie, and Finn boarding the Millennium Falcon, going to Starkiller Base to find Rey, and kind of go into it, shut down the shields in order for the X-Wing pilots to kind of hit this thermal oscillator in order to blow it up. So we kind of have these two stories going on. Rey being strapped into her whole kind of interrogation chair thing somehow figures out what what the Jedi mind trick is, and then uses on the stormtrooper to unlock her chains and everything. So she gets out and then reunites with Finn and Han, who met with Captain Phasma, or as I like to call her, Captain Failsma, in order to shut down the shields. So, and then they toss her in the garbage. And so all the heroes are reunited, and they kind of place the charges all around the different parts of Starkiller Base to kind of detonate it, thermal oscillator, so that the X-Wing can fly in it. But before that, we realize, kind of a callback to a moment halfway through, that Kylo Ren, big bad villain, is actually the son of Han Solo and Leia. And there's this whole backstory of that, the Supreme Leader Snoke, or Supreme Leader Gollum as I call him, tempted Ben Solo to turn to the dark side, and he became Kylo Ren, and then that kind of destroyed the whole family. He destroyed all the kids in the Jedi Temple, and that kind of broke up the trio. Luke became a recluse and went to Ahch-To. Leia decided to stay with the New Republic and then formed a resistance against the First Order, and then Han Solo went back to smuggling. So this adventure kind of almost reunites all the characters except for Luke Skywalker. But yeah, back to the ending. Han Solo confronts Kylo Ren. He tries to redeem him because Leia said, please bring back our son home. No matter what you do, just bring back our son home. So then Han tries to reach out to Ben, tries to bring him back to the light side. But then, obviously Kylo Ren still wants to become bigger and badder and, get deeper into the dark side. So activates his lightsaber and then stabs Han Solo. He falls off the railway and then kind of falls down into the abyss. And then, Chewie shoots Kylo Ren in the side, so he's in pain and kind of tries to use the pain to get more steep in the dark side. Finn and Rey see this from the balcony. They're freaking out. They're trying to shoot all the stormtroopers. They get away. Kylo Ren goes after them. Activates his lightsaber, and then Finn gets Luke's lightsaber that Maz Kanata gave him back at the castle. They have their whole lightsaber duel. Kylo eventually overtakes Finn. Slices up his back. He gets knocked out. He tries to go after the lightsaber. Tries to use the Force to get a lightsaber, and then just when you think all hope is lost, the lightsaber kind of jiggles a little bit and then flies out of the snow and then shoots past Kylo Ren, and then suddenly Rey catches it, which I thought was going to be Luke Skywalker, which I know a lot of people did as well, but oh well. So now she's Force sensitive and is capable of using the Force and is capable of using a lightsaber. I know they set up with her staff that, she's capable of, handling herself, which, yeah, it was totally fine. But, the fact that she knows how to, use lightsaber and handle it, not only handle it, but also go into a lightsaber duel with Kylo Ren, who's a trained, not only a fallen Jedi, but also, a trained dark side user, because I know they don't have Sith in this story. But also beat him because I know they have the excuse he was feeling conflicted about killing his father. He was in pain from being shot at. But I mean, like a couple scenes earlier, you use the Force to like, freeze laser bolts and, put her to sleep and all that. You can't just do that during this lightsaber duel. But anyway, so Rey somehow, overtakes Kylo Ren, and, just before she's about to give the final blow, the planet shakes and then they kind of get separated because the planet's about to be destroyed, because meanwhile, Poe in his X-Wing, gets into the Starkiller base, shoots all those little sport rails around the thermal oscillator. So then the planet's about to be destroyed. Chewie comes in with the Millennium Falcon and rescues Finn and Rey. They fly off, and then somehow Hux and Kylo get off the planet before it gets destroyed. So then he can finish his training with Snoke. So then, everything's great. The Starkiller base gets destroyed. And I remember when I was sitting in the theater, like some people were cheering and some people were just kind of like just in their seats, like, okay. It's just like, okay, literally you're just taking the plot points of A New Hope and putting them into Force Awakens, and with this whole Death Star being destroyed, so I didn't really feel anything during that. But yeah, anyway, everybody reunites back on the Resistant planet, and we get the scene of Leia, walking past Chewbacca, and then, hugging Rey, who she's never met in the entire story, but I know JJ was saying, it's like the Force that connects them. And, he apologized later on the fact that Leia didn't hug Chewbacca, who Han Solo just died in the previous scene, so it's like her ex-husband and then his best friend. So, but then, we get the scene in Last Jedi where they finally hug, because, Rian Johnson was actually paying attention to the lore. Out of all, like, the faults with Last Jedi, I think, that was something that I approve of, that Ryan actually did. So kudos to you. And then we have, the whole, like, ending sequence of them getting the piece of the map from BB-8 and putting it into R2-D2, who's been asleep this whole time or in low power mode, but conveniently wakes up when they need him to. So, but anyway, they put the piece into the map and they realize where Luke Skywalker actually is in the whole grand scheme of the universe. They realize that he's on Ahch-To. So they send Rey, and originally it was going to be BB-8, but then Rian Johnson was like, hey, can you actually make it be R2-D2 instead? Just because, Luke Skywalker would have no idea who BB-8 is. So if he sees like, the Millennium Falcon and Chewbacca and R2-D2, it just would work better for the story. So they changed R2-D2. They fly off to Ahch-To, meet up with Luke Skywalker. And I know, again, originally Luke Skywalker was supposed to be like using the Force, and there's supposed to be like, boulders flying around. But again, Ryan changed it because he wanted Luke to be cut off from the Force. So Rey meets with Luke Skywalker, he has this whole dramatic turn and takes off his hood and all that, and then you see like old Luke Skywalker. Rey holds out the lightsaber to him that she got from the previous scene, and then it literally ends on a cliffhanger until we get to Last Jedi, but that'll be for another review. But overall, I think it was like, I know it copies a lot from A New Hope, but I think what JJ was trying to say is he really wanted to kind of reintegrate the fandom into like what worked with the original Star Wars movies, since in a way a direct sequel to Return of the Jedi. So he kind of wanted to reorient people back into the world of Star Wars, because I know like the prequels got a lot of like controversy and a lot of hate, so he kind of wanted to kind of stray away from that and kind of refamiliarize people with like what they loved about the original Star Wars movies and kind of go off from there.